What's up guys, welcome back and happy New Year's Eve. Today we're going to take a look at some of the stuff and things that I've been working on over the past few months that haven't been worth a standalone video of their own. Most of those involve putting BMW parts on or making BMW-esque parts for a 13B REW, so let's check it out. The first stop is the intake manifold, which was made out of 3D printed aluminum, and I finally finished it off for good and had it powder coated in a black wrinkle and had exposed text for the BMW logo on top, and I couldn't be happier with the way this came out. The last thing we gotta do is install some studs with some Loctite. I turned these down to 75 millimeters from 80. This is just gonna give us a little extra clearance to install and remove this while it's in the car. The other piece that's 3D printed aluminum is the charge pipe. 3D printing allowed me to integrate the Bosch drive-by-wire throttle body interface into the pipe itself without any welding. This allowed me to create a super tight radius with a very smooth interior surface without any additional fabrication. The last thing we're going to do with the charge pipe is install the flexible silicone hose. Even though we have the flexible clamps, this is just going to allow a degree of movement and prevent any vibration or cracking that might occur. Instead of traditional hose clamps, I opted to use Oetiker ear clamps because this doesn't have to be serviceable on a regular basis. In a fairly recent video, I mounted the high voltage starter generator from the BMW i8 onto the 13B, and I ended up redoing the mount for a couple reasons. The first of which was there was a fair amount of flex on the first mount that I built, as seen here. I also didn't have the generator bolted to the bracket when I welded it, so I had to drill out the spacers a little bit, which created a little additional slop that I didn't really like. I created another support bracket that bolts to the front timing cover to help triangulate everything, and it keeps it from tipping forward under the heavy belt tension. I ordered a fresh batch of parts from our friends over at Sen Cut Sen, and then welded everything together again. This resulted in a much tighter fit and a stiffer bracket that had almost no deflection compared to the previous version. Next up is the custom 8-rib drive pulley, which was machined out of 6061 aluminum from our friends over at Parts Badger in Wisconsin. The technical name is a Poly V pulley, and if you want to design one of your own, you need to make sure that the rib profile matches that of your belt. In my case, I had to choose the PK profile. I also drew up a 36-1 trigger wheel, which was laser cut out of steel and then yellow zinc plated. Another 3D printed aluminum part is the bracket for the crank trigger. This only requires tapping the threads in which to install the ZF Hall effect sensor. The other thing I had to address is because I'm not also driving the water pump as in the i8, the tension on the pulleys is a little bit less than the factory configuration. So in order to bring the tension back onto the belt, I increased the size of the idler pulleys on the tensioner itself. I went from the stock 57mm up to a 70mm with a pulley I chose out of the Gates catalog to increase the amount of compression on the spring in the tensioner. But you might spot the small problem here of the belt overhanging the pulley. The larger idler pulleys on the tensioner did the job of bringing the tension back, but for some reason, Gates decided to size these things apparently like lumber, because this is actually advertised as a 31mm wide pulley. I don't know where the rest of the material went, but I didn't get it. So I bought a different Gates pulley, which is now wide enough. Hopefully it actually clears. We'll find out in a minute. But they don't give any dimensions of what the offset is on the pulley. So thankfully it uses the same bearing and there's no locating step. It looks like these are just a press fit in, so we can blow one of the bearings out and then center the other one. With the generator squared away, let's take a look at the start of the cooling system. This is going to be based around a Pureberg CWA 400 electric water pump. These can get sort of a bad reputation for reliability because in the OEM applications, it's not uncommon for them to last only 50 to 100,000 miles, which is less than ideal if it's your daily driver, but let's be realistic, that's probably about 6 lifetimes for most of your project cars. The other reason that I chose the Pureberg pump over some more common aftermarket options is its ability to flow under pressure. When we talk about pressure, it's not the cooling system pressure, but the differential pressure between the inlet and the outlet. Because the i8 has fairly small coolant pipes run under the car at 1-inch diameter, and we're also going to be running -16AN hoses, there is going to be some pressure buildup as you try to flow a ton of water through it. If we take a look at the flow chart for the CWA 400, we can see that it maintains the volume of flow even though the head pressure rises. Alternatively, if we look at the flow chart for Davies Craig water pumps, which are a common aftermarket choice, we can see that the output absolutely nosedives to 0 as the pressure builds. So at about 9 psi of head pressure, we have almost no flow at all. This is also true of fuel pumps as well, so you want to verify the test conditions at which the flow is rated. It's not uncommon to see massive flow numbers thrown around, but these might not reflect actual real-world conditions. This is a CWA 400 water pump found as an OEM installation on a lot of BMWs. The way that it's laid out is a bit troublesome for packaging. You have a reasonably flat layout of mounting brackets, so you can bolt it to something flat with some spacers on this side. But the problem is that the outlet is firing directly toward the area that you're going to have to mount it. And then on top of that, you have the electrical connector firing off in yet a different direction, so it really takes up a ridiculous amount of space. But thankfully this thing comes apart pretty easily, and I've already removed the snap ring. I've had this apart already, but to get it apart, you basically shove a screwdriver against the snap ring, you twist, and it'll pop off. It's not really that easy, but use a little persuasion to get it past the O-ring, and then you'll be in good shape. So what we're gonna do is reclock this thing so that the outlet is roughly in the same orientation as the electrical connector. And we are going to have to modify this slightly because normally there's an indexing tab, and we're just going to have to draw out where we're going to cut a new indexing tab so we can seat this and have it firing in the correct direction. While we have this apart, we're going to cut the factory inlets and outlets off and then weld some -16 fittings onto them. pump gets mounted to a combination bracket that also locates the IGN-1A ignition coils, and the pump itself is held in place by yet another 3D printed aluminum part. So I'm using a -16 adapter for the coolant hoses. Got this from ProJ. Been pretty happy with the stuff that I've gotten from them. However, on the backside here, not super thrilled with the 90-degree transitions for the water flow, so we're just going to touch those up with a die grinder before we bolt this onto the motor. Another small modification that I had to do was to remove the heater hose outlet on the rear plate of the 13B. And due to the thin wall, I decided to use an AN or B fitting instead of an NPT in order to eliminate the possibility of cracking the housing. I didn't have any way of fixturing this thing in a drill press or anything steady, so we just said screw it and did it by hand. The result turned out pretty okay, and I didn't end up with a scrapped rear iron. One thing I don't like about the factory Mazda implementation of the oil filter housing is that it puts the filter upside down. And while you could wait for all the oil to drain out of the filter, I like to change my oil while it's warm, and I don't really want to dribble oil all down the side of my block and make a mess. Naturally, the solution to this was to add more BMW parts. I designed an oil filter housing that bolts to the factory pedestal and uses BMW N54 style oil filter and oil filter cap. My daily driver is a 335, so I have the same filter in both of my cars. In measuring the plastic cap, I determined that the threads loosely follow the DIN 513 standard, but didn't seem to align with any of the standard S classifications of threads, so I had to make some guesses and assumptions to make it all work. Because of this, I dragged my feet a little while in terms of ordering, but I finally bit the bullet and used the services of Xometry to get this made from one of their economy locations overseas. I didn't want to invest too much in this in case I screwed up.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
After a brief panic attack, I determined that there was just a rolled over edge on the start of the threads, so I went through and removed some of the material to make a more gradual transition that was a little bit thicker and harder for the threads to deform and pull up. After resolving that, everything fit together well. Don't mind the oil, I designed this on an aftermarket filter cap, and I decided to pull one out of my daily driver to see if that one fit as well. Next up, we got some more laser cut parts. In this case, it's the axle support for the intermediate shaft. As a 13B never came from the factory in a transverse layout, I needed some means of supporting the intermediate shaft with a bearing. The solution was 2 half-inch aluminum plates that bolt to the front cover and allow the mounting of a bearing. To verify that an intermediate shaft would actually clear the turbo manifold and allow us to remove and install it without tearing half the car apart, I made a mock-up axle out of Schedule 40 pipe, had to turn the ends down in order to fit through the bearing and to fit inside the transmission case. I still have yet to figure out who I'm going to have make the axles, and that's going to be another major piece of the puzzle. Another area that I spent a lot of time on in this build is making sure that everything would be serviceable after it's on the car. I built enough cars over the years that I've screwed myself in quite a number of ways, and it makes it quite difficult to work on the car after the fact, and that's always just a miserable time. I even went so far as to 3D scan my forearm holding a stubby wrench so I could gauge access to spark plugs and other tight spaces. Once all the stuff is in the car, I have pretty good access from underneath once the under tray is removed, but access from the top is limited to a fairly small access hatch. Send Cut Send offers a material called hardboard, which allows you to mock up some fairly large parts for pretty cheap. I decided to make a hardboard mock-up of the access panel to replicate what it'd be like in the car so that I could verify that I can actually get the intake manifold out, the intake pipe, all that stuff to verify accessibility. With the side panels bolted to the subframe, I just dropped the top panel on, which is located by tab and slot. And now we can determine whether we've inadvertently designed any engine out services. Fitment was even better than I anticipated, and everything went in and out without any issues. With everything verified, we can now tear everything apart again and get the subframe out of my garage for a couple weeks to get some extra space. That also means the next time that this goes in a subframe is going to be to start building out the wiring harness so that we can fire in the garage before we even tear the car apart. Before tearing it down, we did one last 3D scan just to capture the final position of everything with a generator, because this needs to come off and go back to the guys down at Parts Hub in Philadelphia. One of the modifications that I'm doing to the motor is a front and rear ball bearing support to take the radial load of the tensioner. It's not uncommon to see wear at opposing sides on the main bearings and the stationary gears, and this seems to be caused by over-tightening of the drive pulleys. Because the tensioner is going to put way more force on the shaft than Mazda ever designed it for, we're going to support both the front and rear of the eccentric shaft with radial ball bearings with a setup from E&J Auto Works down in Florida, and then that's going to keep everything centered and keep the bearings from eating themselves alive. That's going to wrap it up for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you've been liking the build series. There's a lot more to come. It might seem like we're rounding the final corner to get this thing swapped, but there is still a monumental amount of work to get done. Since this is coming out New Year's Eve, hopefully this gave you a few minute break from watching people in ridiculous glasses wait for a glittery ball to slide down a pole, and cheers to another year of your car sitting on jack stands because you spend too much time watching YouTube. See you next time.